Liminal spaces in Zelda are weird. Transitional areas that have a hint of uncanniness to them, and odd feeling. When it comes to real life and video games, you'll find these in both. And when it comes to video games, ever since I fell behind the castle door in Super Mario 64, I've sort of been obsessed with transitional doorway spaces, or areas that are out of reach, that change when you get close. So in this video, we're going to get up close and personal, focusing on the places that most players have never seen. And the reason why is these places change when your character draws near. This may very well be my strangest Zelda video yet, so I hope you enjoy this bizarre trip into the unknown. And speaking of bizarre trips into the unknown, before you head into your next haunted corn maze, make sure you grab a Zardy plush keychain to help you navigate. It's the 2-year anniversary of my first game, so if you want one before they're gone, click the link in the description below. Now, in The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, it doesn't take very long to encounter the first example of this type of space. Now, there is an earlier example that happens when you leave between the different areas in Kokiri Forest, but I want to talk about the Deku Tree. Specifically because the game itself instructs you to take a look at the area that we'll be talking about. When you first walk into the Deku Tree, Navi alerts you to talk to her, and when you talk to her, she says, basically, hey, look down below, there's something beneath this spider web. And so, we as players look down below, and we can see that there's water or something beneath us, and we get the idea that, oh, we have to go down here at some point. But it's actually this area that we're looking down below, this transitional space that we can never actually get in. Now you might be thinking, wait, that makes no sense. We're literally going to go up top, jump down below, and get there. And that is true, but it's also not true, because when Link goes down this hole, the room we see actually unloads, and the proper higher resolution room actually loads into its place. Anytime our character draws near enough, this transition happens. This transition also happens when we're climbing up, and the area above us becomes higher resolution. So these rooms change before we get into them. Now, if we were to go out of bounds, hypothetically, and go around the trigger for this to happen, we can actually reach this destination without it changing. And as you can see, it's pretty strange. The water itself is not moving, only half the room exists, and we're just out here in the void. It feels like a weird forbidden land, like we shouldn't be here, we're not supposed to be here at all. Yet, here we are. And reaching places like this, I don't know, I find it really interesting. The thing is, when we're playing on an emulator, we can tell sort of by the quality that a stark change happens when we're going down this hole. But on the Nintendo 64 at the original resolution, it was a bit harder to tell. And I think that's what makes revisiting this place 20-something years later kind of cool. Now, if we're to actually go up top and do the same thing by going out of bounds and avoiding the trigger, well, we can reach the top of the Deku Tree as well, and you'll see it is a low-quality version. These things unload to save a memory. There's no point in having a fully rendered area if the player cannot actually see it. And what we're left with is the top of the Deku Tree, but it looks like a fleeting memory. It's like you can only remember certain parts of the Deku Tree, and only those things are called into existence. It's weirdly haunting. Now, there is a third level, and we can do the same thing. And one of the things that's interesting about doing this is oftentimes parameters exist from the previous areas that are applied to the new area. So as we go down below, and we're in this water area. Now, the water down here is moving. It was not moving up above, but it is moving down here. Yet, the water doesn't really exist. The water down here normally gets called upon when Link transitions down here. Because we did not do that properly, the water is not down here, yet the water from up above still persists. Water is kind of weird in Ocarina of Time. It kind of goes down quite a ways, way beyond the map. So anytime you walk underneath water and there's water above you, well, you're gonna start swimming. And as you can see down here, the water down here does not affect us. However, the water boxes from above stretch down here and cause us to start swimming upwards. And we can just walk into these and walk out, and it's like there is a floating cube of water in front of us. And playing with it is honestly quite fun. I mean, the physics make no sense at all, but that's what also makes it magical. But the same practice of unloading areas and showing off low quality areas, these sort of transitional spaces, is used throughout the game. And this is only one example. So now we're going to move on to an equally strange one, which is the Temple of Time. Now, I understand why they did this at the Temple of Time, but also it's very, very easy to see, which makes it very strange. Basically, behind the Door of Time, there is an area that when you walk on top of it, it loads in a lower quality version of the room you just left and loads in the higher quality version of the area in front of you. And these two spaces flip back and forth like a switch. But it's actually kind of poorly designed because when the lower quality version is in front of you, when you're facing the Master Sword, you can see these walls that sort of just come out of nowhere and clip in. Like you have walls disappearing and appearing in front of you. Also, if Sheik happens to be there, Sheik disappears and reappears in front of you, just from walking back and forth. Now, if we were to get back here, you can see that we can walk through these walls. The collision for this room, and really any room that we'll be covering, still is the same as it was before. It's just the visuals are the things that change. Now, the pedestal that holds the Master Sword has certainly seen better days in the low quality version. And in this state, we actually cannot activate the pedestal. We cannot put our sword into it. And on the opposite side, if we were to go to the front of the temple and avoid triggering the higher quality load-in, you'll see that we just have this big open room. There's like invisible walls and stuff like that, but we can walk out of here and go to the map normally. Warps and things like that are still intact, at least if they aren't tied to like a door or something. But now that we're done with the Temple of Time, let's go to the bottom of the well, because in the bottom of the well, there are two layers that have the same effect. When you first make it into the tunnel system at the bottom of the well, there is a room below you that can be accessed by different holes in the floor. And so the developers knew that if Link was looking down here, they would only have to show a portion of this room. Why bother loading the whole thing and bogging down memory when you only have to show a sliver? Now, accessing this sliver of a room is kind of a fever dream. There's just like poison water everywhere, and you're just in this weird dimensional rift. Being down here and looking up and seeing the rest of this very creepy dungeon, it was definitely a bit spooky. It felt like I was standing somewhere where no one had been before. And although it's cool here, we have more places to see, so let's move on. Now, Zelda's Courtyard, which is a place I feel like I'm including in every video because there's always something weird about it, but this area actually does it a bit differently because the areas that you're looking at cannot actually be accessed. So in Zelda's Courtyard, if we're looking out, we can see a tree and how the inside of the path to get here sort of curves around the corner. Well, this patch of grass actually cannot be stood on. Link will fall through the ground out here, and he will do the same thing if we try to go into Zelda's room from the actual path. So if we're outside in the sneaking section and we look in, we can see a lower quality version of this room. There's like the Triforce on the wall. There's no moat, the water's just gone. But anyways, the grass in here cannot be stood on. So trying to do so will cause Link to fall through the floor. Moving out to areas like the Forest Temple. Well, the Forest Temple has this big elevator, and a lot of times when there's vertical distance up and down areas that have a lot of height, a lot of times this mechanic is used. However, the Forest Temple is a bit different because it doesn't have to be used. This is because the vertical shaft that runs up and down in the Forest Temple is obscured by an elevator. So the areas up top and the areas down below are actually just black. There is no preview needed because the player can never see the other area. What's neat though is that the elevator is always loaded in regardless of what is loaded within the entire dungeon. However, the elevator does not work though if the room you're in is not loaded. Now, similar to the Deku Tree, which has 3 transitional areas, the Fire Temple also does this too, but at a greater scale. The Fire Temple has 3 rooms that are stacked on top of each other. You have this giant fiery base down below, you have these very thin pathways up above, and then way up above that, you have this circular room that goes around this giant hole. When you're down below, the pathways up above are largely unloaded. And beyond that, the upper room doesn't really even exist. It actually looks like this tunnel is closed off from this perspective. Now, normally these different areas load in as you fall from up above, but this only works one way. If we were to fly up from the ground level to the middle level will not load in. So we need to go through the dungeon and make our way up there. But instead of stopping in this middle section, we're going to go all the way to the top. And then, when we reach that area, we can look down below. We can see both low-resolution areas stacked on top of each other. Now, if we fell down at this point, the game would fade to black before we got to each area, and upon coming out of the black fade, that area would be loaded in. Pretty sure they did this to hide the transition, which is a bit weird because it's actually kind of not done very well. I swear, it moves your character to the left or right and actually changes your position when you're falling through this black void. And I'm not entirely sure why that happens, but it does. Anyways, we're going back up top. We're going to skip this. We want to go to that center area and see what it looks like in its refined liminal glory. And as you can see, the ground is paper thin. All these pathways are just a sheet of paper that we're walking on top of. But the thing I'm after is actually way down below. I'm most interested in the lava room. So we're heading there now. Once again, we head out of bounds, we fall, and we enter this strange lava field. Basically, everything in this room is missing. We have like these weird floating bridges that go nowhere. We have some of the geometry of the rocks coming out of the lava, and then we just got lava going everywhere. I was actually very surprised to see that the lava damages Link when we're down here. Although I guess I shouldn't be surprised because I do know that certain surfaces on the map, especially areas that hurt Link, tend to exist whether the room is there or not. This can be spikes or traps or poison water. All of it will still hurt Link even if it's gone. Speaking of surfaces that can hurt Link, if we go to the Shadow Temple and enter the Bongo Bongo fight, the area up above and the area down below are sort of like this, except they also are not. The poison water and the things around the giant drum do not exist technically when you're up above, but the thing is you actually cannot get down below without triggering this fight. Even if we go out of bounds to avoid the cutscene will still trigger and it will pull us down below and there's nothing we can do. So this one's kind of a bust. So let's go directly to the surface above us, and we are at the windmill. Now the windmill has this too. And when you're in the windmill, the graveyard chase area basically stops at the stone slab door, and when we are by the blocks of time, majority of the windmill itself is gone. Going back into the room, we'll see that it's basically just the spinning center. There's no heart piece, there's no weird dude trying to teach us a paradox song. It's just a merry-go-round that goes around and around and around. And now that we're a bit dizzy, it's time to focus on our final example. And this example is different than the others because the room itself is actually fake. It makes you think you're in a place that you were before, but you're actually not on the same map. So when Ganondorf's tower is collapsing, we come across this Redead on a bridge. And this Redead is annoying because it always screams at us and stops us, but the area surrounding us is actually fake. If we try to leave this bridge, we would find that half of this room is gone. And beyond half this room being gone, a lot of the room's collision is missing as well. We can walk around in certain areas and we'll realize that the doors to all the different talisman areas are just missing, and that as we continue to go around, we'll eventually jump through the ground because it does not exist. The whole back half of this area is chopped off, and if we head down below beneath the bridge, which we can also walk beneath there, it's totally fine, there is collision, we'll see that the collision actually does not match up with the model itself, because there are places where the collision is different than the castle interior model that we see. In these sections, we can walk through the wall a bit, and in the very back, before Link jumps off into the void, well, we can actually take a left or a right, and we walk out onto this invisible floor that spans the entirety of this half section. It's kind of a neat find. This would be one of the best and most trollish hiding spots in Ocarina of Time Online. It's like you're on a cutaway copy of a map, and you're actually able to hide out of bounds beneath the bridge where people come out during a chase sequence, and you can hide behind a wall, beneath them, and out in the ever-consuming darkness. But with that, our loading zone / liminal space Zelda video has come to a close. I hope you learned some really useless knowledge in this video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Cheers!